Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me again. Hope you've had a good weekend. You've enjoyed the Jubilee celebrations. Today is the third session of the 5-part DIY at home series. Apologies I missed you last week. I was full of a cold, but I'm feeling much better today. So today we're going to be looking at adding different types of locks to your doors to make them nice and secure. And then we're going to look at how to replace door handles and even fit a brand new one as well. So again, it's always useful to have the tools to hand ready so that you can use them. So we're going to have a quick look at the tools that we're going to be using for the first one, which is this chain lock here. I'm sure most of you have seen one before. I'm going to be showing you how to fit a brand new one. Maybe you've had your door painted, or maybe it's looking a bit old, or it's coming a bit loose. So I'm going to show you how to fit a new one. So the tools that we're going to be using today, we're actually going to be using a hammer and nail, which I don't think we've used so far on the previous tasks, so that'll be exciting. We're also going to need our pencils again, 2. Remember, we might lose 1. We're going to need a screwdriver, which remember needs to be the same as the sort of screws that we're using. So I'm not sure if you'll see the detail. These are the screws that we're going to be using, and they're actually a posi screw. So I need to make sure I've got my posi screwdriver, and I don't have to, but if I wanted to, I could also use my combi as well. Again, with my screw end bit, which again is a posi. So if you remember way back to the first session, I spoke about drill bits and different drill bits for different sorts of materials. And one of the drill bits we spoke about was a wood drill bit. And I don't know if you remember, it had a point at the edge, and the idea was that the drill bit had a point at the edge to make a pilot hole to prepare the wood for when you put the screw in. What we can do though, if we're using particularly small screws, so these screws today, chances of you having a small tiny drill bit is probably a little bit rare. So what we can do instead is use a hammer and nail to make that pilot hole before we screw in. So we're just going to have a quick look at hammer technique. So I've got a piece of wood here, and this is just an average sort of panel pin sort of nail. And if we have a quick look at the hammer, just to go over it again, so we've got the head, which is this bit here, which is what you're going to use to strike the nail into the wood. And we've also got our claw as well, which is what we're going to use to take the nail out. Now, when we're making a pilot hole with the nail, especially for this size screw, it doesn't need to be really, really deep or really, really big. We're only preparing the wood. So what I tend to say is, when you put the nail in, if you can wiggle it out with your fingers, it's probably not in enough. What we want to do is take it out with the claw. So just to show you an example. So you can see I'm holding the hammer by sort of the handle closest to the head, so I've got more control. So if I tap it in a little bit, if I can wiggle it free with my fingers, it's probably not in enough. So if we tap it in again, can see that that's now not coming out. Now, one thing I do want to go over is how to use the claw correctly. So I see a lot of people in the courses that I teach actually use the claw like this. So the nail fits between these two parts here, but there is actually, I don't know if you can see, there's a visible gap between the claw and the wood. And essentially all you're doing, if you use it that way, is you're just using brute force and brute strength to pull the nail out. What we want to do is be taking advantage of this curve of the actual claw so that we're actually levering it out. So the correct technique, I'll lift this up so you can see, is I've actually got the claw in contact with the wood, and it's that sort of motion. So we're actually levering the nail out. So I'll just show you a demonstration. So it should come out nice and easy. If it's difficult to pull out, chances are you're actually just trying to use your strength rather than the characteristics of the hammer. So now we've looked at how to use the hammer correctly, we're going to have a look at this chain lock here. So there's 2 parts to it. One part should always be put onto the door frame. Now, some people, depending on what the hallway's like, we'll try and put this onto the wall. I'm not going to tell you why that's a bad thing at the moment. I just want you to have a think about why that might be bad, and then I'll come back to it a little bit later on. So what I've done first of all is I've got one screw in there just for time purposes, and I'm now going to put my other screw in. So first thing I need to do is draw where my other hole is going to be. So if you want to be really specific, you could get your spirit level at this point and put it down the side to make sure that it's vertically straight. I'm just going to go for it though. So draw where you need to make your mark, and then we're going to use our hammer and nail to make our pilot hole. Okay, I can't wiggle that 3 by my hands, so I'm going to use the claw of the hammer to pull it out. And then I'm going to realign this first part and put my screw in. So I could use my manual screwdriver if I wanted, or I'm going to go for the combi to make sure that it's nice and quick. So just to go over what settings we have on, we're going to start on number 1. Remember, we don't want it too powerful. And the other is it going in the right direction? So remember, we want to be going clockwise or righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So once you're happy, make sure that you've got good control over the screw and you've got a really good indentation. And then just tiny little triggers just to get that screw in. And remember, when it makes that noise, it means to stop, and there's a reason. Either the screw's all the way in, or we need to up the power. For this one, I don't know if you can see, is that the screw's already in. So that's the first part done. So the reason we shouldn't put it on a wall, the wood is a natural gripping fibre, so we don't need a wall plug like we do with brick or plasterboard. So going into wood is going to give us the strongest grip. If we were to put this on the wall, and to do that, we'd need to drill some holes either in plasterboard, in brick, use a wall plug, and then use a screw. If there was any sort of force applied to the door, so if someone was trying to get in, for example, it's more likely that that part is actually just going to snap straight off, because the grip in the wall isn't going to be as good as the grip directly into the door frame. I hope that makes sense. So we've got this bit done first, and you'll see that this part here is where this slots in quite nicely, so it stays in place. So next part is this bit here, which is attached to the door. The first thing you want to make sure is that we've got this piece the right way around. So the idea is that it slots into the big part, we move it over to the small part, and that's what gives us the lock mechanism. So we don't want it this way around, because this is the bit where you put it in and out, and it's just going to come out again if there's any force applied. The other thing to bear in mind is the placement of this. So if I was to place it as close to the edge of the door as possible, and put my chain on, it's going to open the maximum amount it can. If you want a bit more privacy and you don't want to have it opened, so obviously the more open it is, the more likely someone is to maybe to get their hand in there or something like that. If we move it far away, so bear in mind how we put it on. So if you move it as far away as possible, you'll see the door hardly opens at all. So have a really good think about how much you want your door to open, and that will influence whereabouts you put this part. So I'm going to go for medium. So I'm going to go for here. And I've got some holes already, which is great. So I can put my screws in these bits straight away. I'll just do that quickly. And then the process is exactly the same. So draw where my other holes are. I can actually leave that in place while I make my pilot holes. It's a little bit more awkward to try and get out again, as you can see. So I'm just going to get one more in just for time. There we go. And that's that fitted in place. And you can see that's nice and secure. So one thing to remember is, I think we've covered this already, is the combi drill is for speed, not for power. So although those screws are all the way in with the combi, I'm now going to go and tighten them up with my manual. So have a quick look here. I should be able to tighten this a lot more on this one. So you can see that there's a lot more tightening to be done when I use the manual screwdriver. So it's quite a good lock to have. It only costs a few pounds. You could have as many as you wanted. You could have 6 if you wanted. But the main thing is get the piece that is on the door frame in first, because it will make the other bit a lot easier. So I'm just going to undo all of this. The next lock we're going to look at is a bolt lock. I'll show you an example of that in a second. And the process is the same. So we want to be getting the bit on the door frame done first. And there's a reason for this one. Okay, so just to show you what a bolt lock looks like, there should be 2 pieces. So the first piece has the actual slide along bolt, and then the other piece is what that bolt slides into. So once it's in place and it's locked, that's what it should look like. So time for the exciting bit now. We're going to look at a new tool that we've not looked at before. So what can happen if you have a quick look here is essentially this is going to attach to the door and the bolt should slide along, but as we can see at the moment, there is no space for that to actually slide along. So there's 2 different things that we can do. We can attach this to the door frame just as it is, and then what we could do is get a piece of wood to attach to the door, and then the bolt goes on top, and then that usually makes it the same height, obviously depending on the thickness of the wood. But to do that, you have to have the right size wood. You probably have to have a saw, and sometimes it doesn't look very pretty. As you can see, it's very obvious that we've got an extra piece added to the door. So what we're going to do is actually chisel away some of this area here so that this sits flush with the door, so the bolt can then go inside. So what we're actually going to use is a chisel. So this is an example of what a chisel looks like. So it's got a really sharp edge, not just this edge here, which is what most people are aware of. These can be used as well. And if I hold it like that, you'll see there's one side that's completely flat, and then there's one side that's kind of got a bit of a slope. Okay, so which way around we use it can make a difference, because it can make a hole look really, really neat or a little bit jagged. So I'm going to show you which way around to use it. They come in different sizes as well. So we've got a smaller one here and a larger one. And the thing that you want to look out for when you buy in a chisel are the ends here. So these are metal ends, which are great because when we use the hammer to strike it, it's not going to do any damage. You can get some ones that are a little bit cheaper that are plastic, but without that, the plastic's going to come off and it's probably going to break quite easily. So when you're looking for them, make sure they've got these metal ends. So first thing that I'm going to do again is get this in place first of all. So I'm going to put it where I'd like it, and then I'm going to use my pencil to draw around it. Okay, so already I know that this section here I'm going to need to chisel out. In terms of how far down I go into the wood, it depends where the actual door sits. So I don't know if you can see from there. So if I now draw a pencil line where the door meets the frame, I can now see how deep I need to chisel in. So take your chisel and your hammer, and just to show you how this works, so we get a nice clean edge, I'm going to make sure that the flat edge is on the outside. Okay, so it's not this edge here. This is going to actually dig into the area around the hole. We want to make sure that the flat edge is on this side. And all I'm going to do is hold it nice and straight and strike the top. When you've got a big area like this, swap to your bigger one. So again, I've got my flat edge on the outside, so we're getting a nice clean line. Move it along. Okay, so I've got the outline now. What I need to do is chisel into here, straight across, and then this section of wood should come out. I'm going to move my makeshift door out of the way to make this a little bit easier. So again, I've got my flat piece on the bottom. See that wood's coming out quite nicely now. So I need to do a little bit more on here. So I'm going to swap to my bigger one just to make it a little bit easier. If it starts to come away like that, we can use some wood filler to fill that in. The reason that happened is that my line wasn't deep enough on the side. So I'm just going to go in a little bit deeper. There we go. And then we want to get this bit as flat as possible so that this piece sits without wobbling, and I'd say that looks pretty good. So just to make sure I've gone in enough, before I actually put anything in place, I'm just going to give this a quick go. So you can see this slides across quite nicely. So same again. What I need to do is get some pilot holes in there before I put my screws. Now, if you do happen to have a small drill bit, and I'll show you how small is. There we go. So it's absolutely tiny. You'll probably find it's so small it doesn't have a point. But now I'm going to show you how to do a pilot hole with a drill bit instead. So you can see I'm turning the chuck of the combi drill here to get the drill bit in place. Again, I want to make sure my settings definitely going clockwise. And if we look at the settings on the drill, hopefully you'll remember one of them is a picture of a drill. So what I'm going to do now is get my 2 holes in so I can put my screws in. So use our pencil just to make a little mark. And again, it doesn't matter how far you go in, you're just making a hole tear in the wood. Okay, quick change of the bit in the combi. So I'm now back onto my screw bit. And again, I'm going to use my fingers just to get this started. And again, back to the drill. So I put my screw bit in. Don't forget your settings. So definitely going in the right way. And I'm back on one again. So there's that noise telling me to stop. And the noise telling me to stop. So that looks quite neat. Then all there is to fit this in place. So a few tips to remember. Make sure, so if I move my door out a little bit, if you have got a gap on your door, make sure that this part is not overhanging the door, because you don't want to create any problems in terms of the door opening and closing. And what I tend to do is put it out as if it's in place, and from there I can then decide where my holes are going to be. So I've got 2 holes done already. So whilst it's still in that position, I'm going to get my other screws in. So again, I've checked the settings on my drill, and I'm just going to do this one here just for time. So again, I'm swapping to my drill bit. So what I would say about these smaller drill bits is it's really difficult not to get them in straight because they're so tiny. What you end up with is this, and that is not going to do anything at all. So just be really careful if you are using a small drill bit that you're definitely getting it right in the centre of the chuck. And just for pure habit, always give it a quick whirl before you actually use it, just to make sure that it is definitely running straight. So it's going in the right direction. We're back on the drill setting, and just going to do this one here again for time. Again, use my fingers to get it started, and I'm going to go manual this time. So all the time I'm thinking about what sort of screw I'm using. Am I using the right screwdriver? Am I turning it in the right direction? So tighten this one up here, and these 2. And that is your bolt fitted. So you can see nice and smoothly, door opens. And that will help you sometimes with these bolt locks if they've not been fitted like I have done there. So if they've not been fitted while the bolt is out, they're the sort of doors that sometimes you might have to push them in to shut it, or you might need to pull it out slightly to shut it. If you actually attach it in situ as if it's working, that will eliminate any of those issues. So, onto handles. Okay, so sometimes it's really useful to actually have a look at the workings of a door handle before we even start, because it's a little bit of a mystery. So you see this bit, which is called the latch, and then you've got the handles, but sometimes knowing what's actually in between and hidden in the door can be really useful. So I'm going to take this apart. We will get locked in if this goes horribly wrong, so please come and save us if this doesn't go well. So the first thing I want to do is take the screw out of the latch bit, and you'll see that these are flathead screws, which we've not used so far. So the reason flathead screws are usually found on sockets and handles is they just generally look a bit prettier. So it does the same job, it's still got a thread, it's still going to grip into the wood, but they look nicer than a crosshead. The only issue is that they are not easy to actually use with a screwdriver. So one of my top tips would be, if you're having to use a flathead, don't use your combi. I find it's too powerful. You end up losing the grip on the actual slot head, and you might end up actually scratching the screw or even the door handle. So that's my top tip. Always go for the manual when you're doing it. So if I take this handle off, you can see we've got this here, which is called a spindle. The spindle comes out, and then this section comes out, and this is what makes up your actual door. So when you're buying a door handle, it doesn't always come with all the parts that you need, and you need to make sure that it does. If you're going for a straightforward handle replacement, what you want to do to make it as easy as possible is make use of the bits that you've already got. So we've already got our latch, and we've already got our spindle. So when we're actually getting a replacement, all we need to do is make sure that our handle is actually going to fit these bits. So I've got a replacement handle here, and if I actually slot that on the spindle without it being on the door, and if I actually use it, you can see that the latch is working there. That's actually a really great and straightforward replacement of the door handle, because all I need to do is put my latch back in how it was, put my spindle in, and make sure that you put in your handle the right way. So what I don't want to do is have my handle this way here, which I have seen been done, because the door's not going to close. Okay, so the handle always needs to point in towards the door. So it should be that way, like that. And the only thing I need to do is redo my holes to attach the handle to the door. We've got a little bit of spare wood here that's not been painted. That's easily sorted. We could actually top that up if we had any paint. There might be some holes from the previous handle. Again, that's easily sorted. We can sand and fill those. But that's a really straightforward way of replacing your door handle. But what if it doesn't work out like that, which invariably it doesn't? So we actually need to look, when we're buying a handle, we need to look at buying two different parts. So what you'll find is the handles, you'll normally get two, and it will come with the spindle. But we also need to buy the latch as well. So some people aren't aware of that. They'll go to B&Q or something like that. They'll get what they hope is a new door handle, and it will only come with these parts. Don't assume that this is going to fit with the latch that you've already got. So what you might need to do as well is buy a separate latch. These are usually all the same size. So you can see this one here will be the same as the one that we've got in there. If you're unsure, what I tend to say to people is take your parts with you. So if I wanted to use the same latch, I just wanted to change the handles on this door, what I'd do is take my latch off, take my spindle with me, and I would actually line it up in B&Q. I'd actually get it and make sure that it aligns up so you can buy a like for like. If you've got a brand new door and you're choosing from scratch, you don't need to actually check, because you're buying everything brand new. So as long as you're getting the handles and the latch, and you're buying them at the same time where you can check the size, you should be all right. So what I'm going to do is take this handle off here. So again, I'm going for my manual rather than the drill. Okay, so that comes off. Get my new handles. Goes through there like that. And then my new handles would be screwed in place. And I've got a brand new replacement, which is quite nice. If I want to do it from scratch, however, it's a little bit more complicated. So what I would need to do is actually make some holes in the door. So the first hole would be to actually fit this in. So this would slot in the door like that. So I'd need a hole in the door here for this to go into. So we can see I've started one here. And then the other holes I would need are a hole so that I can get my spindle through this way, and a hole so that I could get my spindle through this way. So just to show you how you would actually do that, another brand new bit that we've not looked at before, and it's called a spade or paddle bit, and this is what it looks like. So essentially it's a wood drill bit, exactly the same as the others, just makes a bigger hole. So technique is exactly the same. The settings on the drill are exactly the same. So I've got it on drill setting, and I'm just checking it's going the right way, which it is. So I've started it already, and the idea is that we want the circle big enough for this to fit inside like that. So it's actually probably a little bit small. So I'd probably need to get a bigger drill bit to do this, but we're going to use it anyway, just to show you the technique. And what we want to do is drill far enough in there so that this slots all the way in. So a bit like when we were looking at shelves, what I could do is put my piece next to the drill bit like that, and then I'm going to mark it with some masking tape here, so I know that when the tape hits the edge of the door, we've gone in and off. But just to show you, just to give you a demo, the most difficult bit is actually keeping the door from not moving while you're doing it. So another little top tip. If you are right-handed, what I tend to do is use my left foot to stop the door from moving. And you'll find that naturally you're at a really good angle to actually drill in. If you're left-handed, you do the opposite. So you'd use your left foot, and then again, you'd be at the right angle. So what you'll find with this is essentially it's carving out the wood. So it is going to take time to do. It's not something that you want to rush. So I'm just going to show you, just see if I've got an example. So I've got my hand behind the drill. Going to pull it out so you can see the hole's been made bigger. Might want to empty these little pieces out as well to make it a little bit easier. So first thing you do is drill in the length of your latch. So we keep drilling a little bit more. The next thing we need to do is make a hole on both sides of the door so that we can get our spindle through. So hold it in place, and we get let me just grab a pencil. So we'd get our pencil to make a mark on the door so we know where the hole needs to be. And if you can see, we've got our hole there. And again, we're going to use the same spade bit. And this is where it might be useful to actually close the door because we're going to be pushing against it. But just to show you an example again of what it should look like. So make sure it's going in the right direction. And again, it would go all the way through to the other side. So it should then resemble something like this, which is what we've got already. The other thing that you may need to do, if it's a door that's particularly tight for room, you might need to get your chisel out and just chisel out a little section here, like we did with the bolt lock, just so that when the catch is in place, so when the catch is in place, it's actually flush with the door. So that's something you might need to look at as well. And then after that, it's exactly the same. So that goes in place, spindle goes in the hole here, and the handles are attached to both sides. One thing you do need to bear in mind is the width of your door. So the width of doors can vary slightly, which means that the spindles need to also vary. The last thing you want is to get a spindle that's too short. Just so I can show you. So last thing you want is the spindle to be too short so that when you put the handle on, it doesn't actually reach inside this bit here. So for this situation here, I'm going to try and do it. The handle isn't actually operating the latch because the spindle isn't long enough. So what you'll find is on the packs of the door handles, it will tell you the suitable door width that you can use it with. All you need to do is measure from this edge to this edge, and that will give you the width of the door. If that fits within the range on the packet, then you can use it. If it doesn't, then you need to be looking at a different sort of handle. I hope that makes sense. The other thing we need to consider just before we finish is this latch needs to go into something on the door frame. So again, we're going to need our chisel to make that hole. This is what the plate generally looks like. So again, we need to make sure that this is going on in the right way. So if I hold it like that, you'll see that this bit here would go around the curve of the door frame. We wouldn't want it sticking out like that because it's going to prevent the door from closing. So I've got a bit of a rubbish door, but just to show you how it would fit on here. So it would fit like that. So you can see the curve is going around the door frame. In terms of lining it up, it's going to be pretty difficult to show you, I think. So if we have a look here, what I would do is where the actual latch is touching the door frame, you need to put a little mark with the pencil. Let me just grab the pencil to show you. So I'd be putting a little mark here at the bottom, a little mark here at the top, and that tells you where you need to chisel out the door frame so the latch fits in like that. Hopefully that makes sense. And then the process, again, exactly the same. Whenever you want to put a screw in, we need to make sure there's a pilot hole. So whether that's a nail and hammer or one of those tiny wood drill bits, we need to do that first to prepare the wood for the screws to go in. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of confidence and the skills to be able to give that a go. Have we got any questions? We don't know if we've got any questions because of the way that we filmed it today, but if you do have any questions, drop them down on Facebook. I will pop on later and answer them. And I will be back with you later this week, and we're going to be looking at how to fill holes and cracks and things like that the correct way. So yeah, thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you later in the week.